Welcome to Club Book with Nita Prose. My name is Stacy Hendren, and I am the manager of the Northtown Library in Blaine, part of the Anoka County Library System. I'm thrilled to be hosting our featured guest and will be your moderator for tonight's event. Before I introduce tonight's guest properly, allow me a moment to tell you a bit more about the unique series that brings her to us. Club Book is a program of MELSA, the Metropolitan Library Service Agency, made possible through the Minnesota's Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and coordinated by Library Strategies, part of the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. Anoka County Library is the co-organizer of this evening's talk. I encourage you to thank your legislators for their continued support of legacy funds in libraries. Thanks also to partnering bookseller Red Balloon Bookshop. A purchase link to The Mystery Guest will be available in the comments section of the live stream feed. Have it shipped, pick it up at their lovely store in St. Paul, or have them deliver it personally to your door if you're close to the area. And if you haven't been to Red Balloon Bookshop, I encourage you stop down. It's such a fun bookstore. One final housekeeping note. Also in the comments, you'll see a survey link. Melsa would greatly appreciate hearing what you think of this club book program. It's quick and easy and helps us ensure the future of this amazing series. Our guest tonight, fiction phenom Nita Prose, is the author of the #1 New York Times bestselling mystery, The Maid. Readers and critics alike praise Prose's mastery of plot and place, but reserve greatest acclaim for her memorable protagonist, Molly Gray, a realistically different heroine. Molly's unique lens on the world proves invaluable for the young maid when a real estate magnate turns up dead at her 5-star hotel, and Molly herself becomes the prime suspect. The Maid won Prose the prestigious Anthony and Barry Awards for debut novel, among many other industry honors. It also holds distinction as a Good Morning America book club pick and as one of only a handful of mystery debuts from the past decade to sell more than 1 million copies worldwide. Oscar nominee Florence Pugh is set to star soon in a much anticipated screen treatment. Nita Prose and Molly Gray returned in November 2023 with The Mystery Guest. After a short talk by our guest and some initial questions from me, we'll have time for audience Q&A. Simply drop your questions in the comments thread here on Facebook, and our tech manager will route them to me. You can also send a message to Club Book through our Facebook Messenger or email where we're at clubbookmn@gmail.com. Now, please join me in welcoming Nita Prose.
Thank you so much, Stacy. And I want to thank all of you out there for joining us tonight. I can't see your faces, but I know you're there and you're listening in. And I want to thank you so much for being readers and for supporting great libraries like the ones in your community. I'm thrilled to be here. Now, hopefully many of you, some of you have read either one or both of my books. And I want to tell you a little bit about the inspiration behind the writing of both, and then we'll turn to some questions with Stacy. So I think of myself as an accidental writer. I didn't really mean to write 2 novels. For a very long time, until last December, in fact, I was an editor, and I worked at Simon & Schuster, one of the bigger publishing houses, and I loved my job. So I'm familiar with writers, and I've worked a lot with writers over the course of that career. But then one day I had a lightning bolt moment, and I was at the London Book Fair, which is an event that happens every year in London, where writers and publishers and agents gather. We talk about books. And I was staying at a hotel, and I left and then came back into my room, and I completely surprised my roommate who was cleaning the room. And I remember her sort of stepping back into a dark corner. And the embarrassing part is that she had in her hands my track pants, which were inside out, disgusting and sweaty because I'd just taken them off after having gone for a run and changing into fresh clothes for my meeting. This maid looked at me and I looked at her. We were both wholly and completely embarrassed. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, it is such an invisible and intimate job to be a roommate. And we never spoke to each other. That was that. And then a few days later, I was on my plane ride going back home to Canada, to Toronto, where I live. And I started to hear this voice. And it wasn't my voice. It didn't sound all sloppy like this. It was clean and crisp and polished and precise. Basically, it was Molly. And, you know, I was not prepared for this voice. I didn't even have any paper. So I grabbed the napkin from under my drink and I started to write what I was hearing. And I didn't even know it then, but what I wrote on that napkin was the prologue for The Maid. And that is the moment that I moved from becoming an editor to becoming a writer. So that's the origin story of the first book. Now, when the second book was coming around, you know, the question was, what am I going to write next? And my publishers were calling me frequently by this point because we had amassed quite a readership and asking me, you know, would you entertain the idea of a second Molly book? Would you do a sequel? And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, like I never even planned the book to be a series. And at first I sort of automatic note it. And then I gave it further thought and I thought like maybe there is a way that I can write something more, but I got to give it some time. And I was actually on tour for The Maid, trying to, you know, in the back of my brain, solve this problem and figure out the new tapestry for another book when I was in a museum. I had the day off. And I went to a little town called Lewes outside of Brighton in the UK. And I stumbled upon this castle museum. And inside there were all these display cases. And I looked at one that was most unusual. And inside was the mummified body of a rat and a single silver spoon. And I looked at this display and I thought, what the heck is this doing here? And I read the little card underneath it that explained it. And as it turned out, this was a memorial to a maid who had once worked in the castle. And she was unceremoniously dismissed after having been accused of stealing a piece of silverware. And she claimed she didn't do it. She didn't steal anything, but that didn't matter. She lost her job. She's frog marched out of the door. And many, many years later, this is a 17th century castle, it's old, renovators were opening it up, opened the walls, and lo and behold, what did they find? The mummified body of a rat, and beside it, in this rat's nest, a single silver spoon. And upon reading this true to life, incredible story, for some reason, it suddenly opened up a whole notion of where the second story might go. It's almost as if I could hear Molly's gran in my head saying, you know, be careful with what you assume. Nothing is as it seems, and the past, it never, ever, ever stays buried forever. And with these refrains sort of replaying in my mind, I imagine a world where we would have past and present coming together, where we would have a mystery in the present tense that Molly has to solve. But the way to solve it would be through a journey back in time, through her childhood, to a time long ago when Molly too worked as a maid alongside her grand in a very different setting than the Regency Grand. And so began the second novel, this one here, The Mystery Guest. So this is how it is sometimes, you know, we are stricken with lightning bolts, little ideas that, you know, we can germinate if we choose. You know, the big question is, you know, are you going to go watch Netflix or are you going to actually do something with these ideas? But the wonderful thing is we all have them and we all have the possibility to develop them into something. So those are my two origin stories. I'm delighted to be here. I can't wait to answer your questions. And I think I'll turn it over now to Stacy, who I think is going to join me and ask a few questions before the rest of you do.
Oh, thank you for sharing those stories. I and some of our viewers had curiosity on that silver spoon story, whether or not it was true. And part of me
His
wonders, how did they know that this maid had even been dismissed? How did they know that what the silver spoon was?
I don't know. And that does deserve a call to the museum. I'm sure I could find out. How they have little write-ups on
Right.
displays. It's short, so they try and summarize, so you can't get as much information as you need. But in a way, that's a really great thing for a writer, because from the
Mhm.
barest of details, one can use the imagination to create everything else around it.
Exactly, exactly. So you mentioned Molly, and you mentioned Gran, and the maid that kind of inspired this Molly's beginning. What struck me about both the maid and the mystery guest was how you brought the characters to life.
Mhm.
Those main characters, but as well as just the incidental characters. Everyone was so three-dimensional and you knew who they were.
Yeah.
Will you talk about how you developed those characters and their relationships?
Well, I guess I would lie if I said I didn't in some way base them on real people. And there are little parts of people I know in all of them. And the most wondrous thing of all is nobody recognizes themselves. There is one of my dear friends that to this day, she's read both books and doesn't go, "Wait, am I Angela?" When it's so obvious that she is. So, like most writers, we're a danger to live around or be around because we're mockingbirds. We listen carefully. For some reason, we file away little tidbits of conversations, a nuance about how somebody moves, and physical descriptions live in us in a different way. And we use that as fodder for the creation of a world that is parallel to reality. And the odd thing about that is sometimes that parallel world can have more truth in it than actual reality, which is extra strange.
Yeah, wow. So then tying to that, you mentioned a little bit about what inspired you to cast your sleuth as a hotel maid. Is any part of Molly Gray autobiographical or based on people that you've met?
Yes, in an elliptical way, but absolutely. So many years ago, before I decided to become an editor and get into book publishing, I worked as a special needs teenager teacher. So I worked with a wonderful variety of teens with all kinds of special learning needs. And it was such a formative time in my life. And one of the things I learned was that I wasn't there to teach. I too was there to learn. I still think of those kids all the time, and I think they taught me more than I taught them. And sometimes we would just leave the school and we go out on field trips. And I don't mean like proper field trips, like going to the art gallery or whatever. I mean, we would just go and we take up space in the world. And this wasn't so much for them. It was actually for everyone else. Because I found that when we went out, sometimes there were some people who treated them really badly. Because they might have minor differences, which, after a while working with them, I didn't notice anymore. A tick, or, I had a student who carried around a big stack of newspapers all the time. He needed the past with him all the time to feel safe. And I guess some people thought that was so strange. Um, and it taught me that it was important to be out in public and for people to liaise with the kids. And most people, in all fairness, treated them very well, except for the people who didn't. And I never forgot that. I never forgot witnessing how difficult it would be for these kids to have to negotiate that every time they left their homes and were out in public every single day. But the beauty of it was that these kids rose. They grew bigger, stronger. They had so much human dignity, Stacy. They shone. And watching that sort of bravery, that sort of triumph over people's prejudice, it filled me with such joy. And I wasn't really conscious of it when I was writing Molly. It was only after I was done that I realized what I'd actually accomplished was taking all of the best qualities of all of those incredible kids and giving them all to a single character, Molly.
Oh, wow. I love that bravery, that idea of them growing. Oh,
We have much to learn,
yeah.
much to learn.
Yeah, and we see that, both the good and the bad, in the public library.
I
So,
bet you do. I bet you see it all the time.
yeah. Um, so in both books, you do explore how people react to Molly's differences. And I know when young Molly was in the principal's office, I was near tears.
Yeah.
Um, can you talk a little bit more about that negative inclusion, or that inclusion of negative reactions of others?
Well, it's very much in line with what I just told you, is that most people will treat people who are different well. They will try to be open and inclusive, except for the ones that won't. And they exist everywhere. They exist in school systems, and they exist in libraries, and they exist in hospitals, and they exist in post offices. And so I wanted to depict a situation which is unfortunately too common, where a person with real educational special needs is not getting served by the system. And that's what happens to Molly. There are several reasons it happens, not only because of a particular institutionalized person who stops her in her tracks, but also because Gran is out a generation from Molly and doesn't, isn't really certain how to advocate for her. She knows she needs something. She knows she needs something special, but she doesn't even know what to ask. And so often in our ignorance, in our lack of knowing, how someone is different, or what they need, it is difficult sometimes to advocate. And certainly Gran contends with that in that principal's office.
Wow. I love Gran. I love Gran so much, and all her different sayings. A good cup of tea will cure all ills.
Yes,
So
it
random
will.
side note. Oh, yes. I was gonna say, do you have a favorite tea? Um,
I love all teas, all of them. And I am a longtime tea drinker. I learned it from my mother, who is in many ways my model for Gran. Now, my mother didn't sort of have that British air about her that Gran has. She was French Canadian but she did have that thing that Gran has, that desire to protect her family at all costs, that maternal instinct, to love beyond all measure, to give beyond all boundaries. And I tried to depict that in Gran, and to give to anyone who might have been lucky enough to have a mom like me, or anyone who didn't, the gift of Gran.
oh, I hear both Gran and Molly in my head the last several months. I need to return this to a state of perfection. Do not assume. And I just love that piece. So thank you for creating her and giving her to us.
Well, but I love that. I love the fact that you can actually hear them. And this is sort of essential to my process too, because I don't actually see myself as a solo creator at all. I give the bare bones of a story on the page. Mine is not a police procedural. It's a floaty world with lots of uncertainties and just its essence and its core. And then your job as a reader is to complete the picture for me. To fill in all the blanks, to fill in everything with the details of what you know about people like Molly and Gran, about hotels, all sorts of things. And between you as the readers and me as the writer, together we create a world. And I love that. I love the fact that you just created Gran and Molly. And interestingly, it felt so true to the Molly and Gran that I have in my heart. And I love that we can communicate that way through the strange medium of a book.
Exactly. We all have these stories, like you said. Will we let them germinate? Mhm.
Exactly.
So was Molly's childhood, as kind of revealed in the mystery guest, fully fleshed out for you as a writer when crafting The Maid, or was this background new for the sequel?
Oh my gosh, no. I had no idea. And I always tell people when they ask about the process and the writing process, what that the writer holds more in their head than's on the page. One has to in order to earn a reader's belief. But I would be lying if I said that I knew her entire childhood. There is no way. I knew that she'd been bullied. I knew that Gran had done extraordinary things and had gone to extraordinary lengths in order to protect Molly and to keep her well and safe. But what that entailed exactly, scene by scene, I had no idea. It was really that museum display that opened my eyes to the idea of another maid, the struggles of another maid, and that Gran might have been a maid herself in another time, in a different setting, and that would be a new kind of internal mystery for Molly to solve. Because I think the big difference between the maid and the mystery guest is Molly's growth. In the Maid, she's alone for the first time. Her compass is gone. Gran is her compass. She has to navigate the world and all of its brutalizing social cues for the very first time on her own, without Gran's benefit. But by the time we get to the mystery guest, she actually knows her way around a bit. She's gained a level of self-confidence and she understands things. And I think this reflects how I see our human growth as well. When we're younger, when we're less mature, we concentrate ourselves. That we have to know ourselves first. And once we do, then we might have room for others to grow empathy and compassion and understanding for those around us. And that's really what the mystery guest is about. It's about Molly's coming to understand who her Gran was and the deep sacrifices she made for Molly.
Yeah. Oh. JD, our kind of jumping to a different piece, our JD Grimthorpe and the rather eccentric glimpse we get of mystery publishing based on anything you've encountered or pure imagination.
I love this, Stacey. I love that you're like, can I ask this? Yeah, she did ask it, and it's perfectly fine. Yes, I mean, I understand the world of publishing, and I've lived it for so long. But JD Grimthorpe it's a creation. It's a pastiche, and almost a cliche of the worst kind of author brought to life on the page. And I love to play with archetypes like that, and I do so in different ways with the minor characters in all the books. The archetype of the lambs, for instance, in the mystery guest, the Ladies Auxiliary Mystery Book Society. Now, if I could, I would be a member of that society. Absolutely. I would be a card holder if it really existed. And I would chase authors around. You'd be there
all
too.
The cat hair floating around.
Absolutely. Discussing books all day and hounding authors sounds great to me. I love it. So JD Grimthorpe, JD Salinger, there's a connection there. A writer who sort of kept to himself, was reclusive in the extreme, where, an audience, a readership was so desperate to know more details about his private life. And in this novel, of course, he is so reclusive, and yet Molly opens the door of his luxurious, foreboding mansion and discovers bit by bit all of his secrets.
Oh yeah. When she walks into that library, it's like, oh yeah, I would like that.
Yes. I see. Me too. I don't have a library like that in my home. Let me just say, I've got some nice shelves, no need to pity me, but that is the library of my dreams.
And the book that's out of place is the dictionary. And of course, that's the book that Molly goes for right away. Oh, yes, I would like to use this dictionary.
Of course she does.
And then tied to that is the Regency Grand based on any real life hotel.
Sorry, is there more to that?
I was going to say the person submitted, I picture the Evelyn in Manhattan.
Oh, bless your heart. I love it. It's one of my favorite things when a reader does see the same thing. A reader picturing something that I didn't put on the page. It makes me thrilled. So the hotel is again sort of a fictional place that I invented. It's a mix of various hotels. Certainly one that's in Toronto called the King Edward. but a couple of hotels elsewhere as well. And again, with that hotel, I just wanted a setting that was universal where the reader could imagine whatever they wanted. And I love it when a reader will ask me, you know, where was that hotel? I pictured the Evelyn. And I'll say, yes, you're absolutely right. And then, you know, Stacy will come up to me and she'll say, actually, I thought it was the Baglioni in London. And I'll say, yes, you are absolutely right. Basically, any reader can come up to me and say they imagine any hotel anywhere. And my answer will be the same. You are right, because you are right. And you're right because you did the work. You completed the picture for me and for yourself. You imagined a world bigger than the one that I created on the page. And therefore, you are my co-creator. And we've done this amazing act of creativity and imagination together.
Oh, I love that. I love, and it's like I can visualize the hotel. I feel like I could sit down and draw the hotel, even if I don't know, even if I don't have an exact hotel that I believe it is. And it's interesting about you talking about like the minimalist piece that you're giving us, but I'm like, but I can see the whole thing.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
It is.
You know, the other thing I can say about the hotel and the specificities is, again, there's all of these little nuggets that find their way into things when you're a writer. And many years ago, when I worked at Penguin Random House, a big publisher in downtown Toronto, every day on my way to work, I would pass the King Edward Hotel. And on the steps of the King Edward Hotel, which is a beautiful old Regency style hotel with red carpeted stairs and gold revolving doors and a podium on the front, there was also this wonderful older doorman. And he wore a great coat with, you know, insignias on the lapel. And he had a little hat. And every time I went by that man, I'm telling you, for like 10 years, he tipped his hat at me when I went in the morning and when I left at night. I never said a word to that man, but I saw like limos pulling up and rock stars getting out and vomiting on his shoes. I saw him like carrying way too many bags for extremely wealthy women. And I saw him do so many things. And he watched that street like it was his. And I felt, even though I'd never spoken to him, like in some weird way, maybe he was watching out after me too.
Oh.
And then I found him in a book. I put him in a book. This real man, I put him in a book. And weirdly, now he's more real to me in the pages than he even was in real life. I know him better.
Wow. So, jumping a little bit more to your writing, what are your rituals for writing? Or how do you balance your day job and burgeoning writing career?
Well, the good news is I don't have my day job anymore. So I write full time now because it was just too much. It was a massive job, being a vice president at a publishing house, and it, you know, I couldn't do it to the same full extent I needed to while writing. So I'm done that now, and life is better. I still wake up savagely early in the morning though, because that's my routine. And I find that time in the dark, 5 a.m., sometimes a little later, to be like this liminal time that's almost, there's a dream state that's still alive in me, and I tap into that. And I also feel like the part of me that judges and says, oh, you suck, your writing sucks, everything you do sucks, that part is still sleeping, like it's still in bed, okay? It needs a lot of sleep because it is cranky, okay? So I monopolize those early hours because I feel free from the burdens I place on myself. And I'm able to like sort of dance on the page in those early hours.
Oh, wow.
So that's my routine. I also, I also have, this is so weird. I also have this hoodie that I wear. And when I call it going into my writing cave, and my writing cave is actually a hoodie that I put on and I wrap it around my head. And basically all you can see are my like glasses, my little eyes poking out. And when I'm really focused on a hard scene, I have to have that on my head. I have to like cloister myself and just be me and my little screen. And the whole world sort of disappears around me. See, I might be a little bit like Molly. And for some reason, I find that extremely liberating and safe.
Oh,
That's
wow.
one of my weird habits. I'm going to regret telling you that story, but there you go.
I kind of want to picture like you in the hoodie. I like how
Okay,
your glasses
I
kind
will
of like
send
went
that to you.
askew.
It's not a glamour shot. I'm not going to put that on my books going forward because no one will buy them. It will scare readers away, but it's the truth.
Hmm. Well, you know, and that's your ritual. Brings you into the world of Molly.
Yep.
I love it. Um, did your professional background as an editor lend any insights or other advantages that were helpful to you as you embarked on a writing career
I
and
would
became a
say
first-time published author?
I would say it did. Certainly, 20 years of working with writers and, understanding the fundamentals of narrative and how to move through a story is the best like MBA in writing you could ever receive.
Mhm.
So, often I'm asked like, how fast you write, how long does it take you to finish a draft? And I really have two answers for that. And the first answer is it takes me about 6 to 7 months to write a first draft. And the second answer is it takes me 20 years and 7 months to write a first draft. It took me a heck of a long time to decide, I think I can do this myself rather than just help other people. And during that time, and because of the good grace of the many writers I was so lucky to work with, I learned the craft of writing. And it's because of those years that I'm able to write relatively quickly, and punch out a draft that is certainly not perfect. Oh no, but that where it's got the right bones and where there's a path forward.
So then did you find it hard to work with an editor yourself, when you yourself are an editor?
I found it so liberating to have eyes. One of the things that really shocked me about being on the other side was author blindness. I knew from being an editor that authors often feel very vulnerable and they sometimes aren't the best judges of what they put on the page. And they've often told me they feel blind. But one thing is when someone tells you what it feels like, and another thing is feeling it yourself. And when I felt that myself, it's like when I don't know if I've written something good or bad, have I set the volume right? Is it working on the page? That is the most alienating feeling for an editor because as an editor, I know what I'm like. I know I wouldn't take on a book, I wouldn't help an author unless I knew how to help them with their manuscript. So I never feel blind. I feel like, yeah, I know what's going on. So becoming an author was like having my eyes removed. So when my editor stepped in, I was incredibly grateful to them for being able to tell me, this is enough, this is too much, these clues work, these ones don't. All kinds of things that they were able to, what I call volume set the
Mhm.
story in different ways, and illuminate the most important elements in ways that I couldn't see at the time. Only in hindsight can you see it as the writer.
Do you, question coming in, what advice would you have for a college student looking to break into the publishing industry on the editorial and publicity side of the business?
Well, I would say the way in most places is through internships. So once you're done a publishing program or you've done some work that prepares you for that, one great thing to do is to intern in a house. That's how most editors got their start. That is how I got my start. And it allows you to watch the shorthand, to see the conversation that happens on the page, in the margins, between editors and writers. And there's nothing in the world quite like that in terms of preparation for entering the world of publishing and understanding editorial. So that's one thing I would say. And the second I would say is read, 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 read,
Mhm.
read.
Here's a couple
Read
good books that
everything.
they should read. They should read these
Yes,
ones.
here's a couple, and I'm pretty sure at your library there are more really great books, lots of them. And there's a reason why I say that. It's not only reading for pleasure, but it's reading to dissect how narrative works. And that is the difference between a casual reader for entertainment and an editor. It's the understanding of the mechanics of writers, how to use scenes, dialogue, beats in order to create an energy that moves a reader.
Yeah.
And that is an art form. And only through really reading with close attention and reading in multiple genres and reading writers you like, as well as writers you do not like, and understanding the mechanisms behind them, only then will you develop your sort of editorial muscle, your understanding of genres that will prepare you for the world of publishing.
Wow. So tying to that, what books or authors inspire you as an author?
You know, I'm an omnivore. I'll read just about anything. So, you know, you could put like a cereal box in front of me and I would read it. I would read it. I couldn't help it. So, you know, I'm inspired by all kinds of writers. Lisa Jewell is one of my favorites. Liz Nugent, the great Irish suspense crime writer, another one of my favorites. But I will also read Marilyn Robinson, who is known for much more literary works. And I will read memoirs. You know, I'll read the Britney Spears memoir. Give it to me now. You know, so I really do read widely and voraciously. And for me, that's a kind of palate cleanser too. It's like, you know, different flavors of chewing gum. And it's nice to step away from one's own genre and enter an entirely different universe. And I love that we can do that through books.
Oh, wow. Ugh. We got a note from a viewer. Says, I picked up The Maid based on a blurb from my all-time favorite, Sarah Penner.
I love
Glad
Sarah.
I did. How does an author or a publisher go about getting recommendations from other writers for your marketing?
Yeah. Well, you know, usually it's your agent or it might be your editor or publisher who's able to do that outreach. In the case of Sarah, I think I already knew her work by the time I reached out to her casually because I absolutely adore her historical novels. And what I love about them is that sense of a main, almost contemporary feeling character moving through a past world. That speaks to me deeply. And I think she's just brilliant. So it was so heartwarming and complimentary for me to see that she actually liked my stuff. But that's the way it usually works, is that someone in the business will help you make that outreach and will offer early copies to those writers in order to get endorsements. It doesn't always happen that way. Stephen King endorsed The Maid out of the blue. I don't know how he got the book, but suddenly I woke up one morning and my entire friends and families network was buzzing on my phone telling me something about Stephen King. And I basically told them to leave me alone because I thought it was a big joke. And then realized, in fact, that he posted about the book on Twitter and said some nice things about it. So that sometimes it will happen organically like that too.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, The Maid and, you know, a Stephen King novel. There's some parallels.
It boggles the mind, but I do love it. You know, I love to see, talk about an omnivore reader. That's Stephen King.
Yeah.
He read this book? For real? Cool.
Excellent. What read likes would you recommend for your fans? Or what are you yourself reading right now?
I'm reading Game of Lies right now by Claire McIntosh, and I'm also reading Holly Jackson's latest book, The Reappearance of Rachel Price, because I'm interviewing her in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I love, love, love her series. It's her YA series, which can be read by adults. I think she, you know, some of the really great quote unquote YA readers are just writers are just writers. They're just writers. Anyone can read them. And she's one of those. Yeah, I'm not too far into Game of Lies, but I look forward to getting further. But the latest Holly Jackson is absolutely great. It's just as good as her Good Girls series. And it's brilliant. A brilliant mother-daughter too in that book.
Oh, nice. Ooh, have to grab that for my YA book club.
Oh yeah.
Full of adults.
Worth it.
Another question came in. courtesy of your success, are you now inundated with galley and quote requests,
I
completing
I
the
have an
circle?
entire desk filled with stacks of galleys, stacks of them. So yes, I do get many, many, many requests. I could have an entire career based on that. Of course, I would go poor. But yes, I do get a lot of requests. But I live and breathe books. So, it's a really wonderful thing to be an early reader. I've always loved that. That's one of my favorite things about publishing is we got early access to books that people would be reading 2 years from now. We're always 2 years ahead. So yes, I do get a lot of early galleys, and I blurb many, many books because I think it's nice to give a hand up to somebody who's really done the work and accomplished a lot on the page.
Yeah, nice. I love galleys.
Yeah, right?
Librarians,
It
another
never
perk of
gets old,
librarians.
right?
Oh
For
no,
book people, it never gets old,
I have this book. No one else gets to read it for a year.
right? You feel special.
So kind of tying to that, how have libraries influenced you as a writer and a
Oh
reader?
my gosh, in every possible way. I did not grow up in a household surrounded by books. My parents were lovely people, but they were not book people. I don't know why I was born unto them. The poor, poor parents. I don't understand. But then they were born with this, bookish girl who, read like crazy when they were sort of mathy people. And I was really lucky to find libraries and to know that that was my place and a safe place where I could have access to books and learning and find, if not people, then at least imaginative spaces that felt like that gave me a sense of belonging, I would say.
Oh, wonderful. I love hearing that. It's
Of
great.
course, because you're the person who creates it.
We try every day.
Yes, I'm sure you succeed.
Oh, could you share something about your path to becoming a writer that isn't in your blurb?
Um, Let me think about that. Yeah, okay. Sure. Part of my role as an editor, which is a little bit unusual, is the fact that with memoirs, at my publishing house, I was often a ghostwriter. So, while The Maid was my debut novel and The Mystery Guest is the follow-up, I have actually, penned and helped others, collaborated with others in penning memoirs previous to this. And I feel like that was a really good basis. It helped me become someone else. Because when you're ghosting a book, you have to listen with so much care and you have to seat yourself behind the eyes of the client, whether that's an astronaut, a celebrity, a musician, whoever it is you're writing with and for. It's usually an expert in their field, but they're not a writer.
Right.
And that was excellent preparation in a way for writing Molly, because it's the same process. It was the same process of finding a voice, of sitting behind the eyes and understanding the experience of living as somebody else.
Right. Oh. So somebody just asked, will there be a third book? And I know there has been a new announcement. Will you tell us a little bit more about that?
Indeed, there will be. It's coming out in October and it's called The Mistletoe Mystery. It's a novella and it features Molly and her gran and a lot of Juan Manuel. And, there's a new mystery to be solved, this kind. And this mystery is a little bit different because it's a mystery of the heart. It's nearing the holidays. Molly loves the holidays, but she always feels nostalgic about Gran at that time because Gran is gone. But Juan does his absolute best to make Christmas and the magical time of year so warm and wonderful. But Juan has been acting a little odd. There's unexplainable comings and goings, and it starts to challenge Molly and make her really wonder about the fabric of who they are together, and more importantly, who she is on her own. And she must solve a mystery around that, that circles around a Secret Santa gift exchange happening at the hotel. But what Molly doesn't realize as she goes through this anxious period is that she is about to get the biggest gift of her life.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So that is the Mistletoe Mystery. And if you want to find out more, you can go to my website at nitaprose.com. And it's available for pre-order now. Authors love it when you pre-order. It helps us a ton. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to sharing that little bit of holiday magic with my readers.
Do you think there will be more after that,
There
or?
will be, because I'm writing it. I wrote some of it today, in fact. So yeah, I have one more in the series, and I think that will be the close of it. So one more big book to come, probably in 2025.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, we all are looking forward to more
Oh,
Molly, and thank you so much.
thank you.
Another one coming from the email. Let me see. Did your books require any research in addition to imagination? The Maid has themes of drug muling. Mystery Guest gives us a nice glimpse into historic and renovated hotel tea rooms. I realize those are very different and perhaps odd examples, but the question still stands. Did you do research for Molly?
Yeah, for sure I did, but it's not the typical kind of research that one might accept of, say, a legal procedural or a police procedural, where the expectation for those genres is exactitude and verisimilitude, and it must be according to the way things work in reality.
Yeah.
In both of these books, I created floating worlds that are closer to a Wes Anderson film than they are to reality. And I triaged and placed more hierarchical importance on the emotional states of the characters, mostly Molly. That is the thing that is of utmost importance, not fact or reality in both of these books. So that changes how one does one's research, right? I'm not trying to recreate how a police officer might move through the world of a crime. That is not my intention. And so those readers who might be expecting that kind of style, I always point them to John Grisham or many other writers who do that so well and in ways that I will never be capable of because I do a different thing. So that being said, I'm constantly researching. I'm always looking up details that have an emotional root to them and that somehow feel real, whether that's something small about an Art Deco hotel. It could be as small as, the railing going up the grand staircase in the middle of the hotel. Is it going to have a serpent on it? And is there going to be a ball in the mouth of that serpent? And might that fit into an Art Deco aesthetic? And can I get it so crisp in my mind that I can grab its essence in 3 words, put that on the page, and the reader will, as Stacy did earlier, imagine the rest of the scene in her mind. So that is the kind of research that I will do to create a quote unquote reality within a floating surreal world.
We did have a comment I wanted to share from a viewer. It said, you mentioned, I read The Maid while on vacation. I'm gonna start over. I read The Maid while on vacation in South Africa and will never forget the book or the trip. Cannot wait to read The Mystery Guest. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for reading.
Oh, yes. Highly recommend The Mystery Guest after The Maid. Um, you talked a little bit about your place to write. Let me jump down. I love that Mr. Preston's relationship to Molly is teased out for the reader and then explained to the reader before it is shared with Molly. Will there be more Mr. Preston in the books to come?
Oh, yes, there will. Oh, yes. He's absolutely fundamental. And even more so in the books to come. So you will see him in the Mistletoe Mystery. And if your heart doesn't melt, I haven't done my job right. Because yeah. Yeah. There's so much that happens between him and Molly in that next book. And you'll just see what a good egg he is.
Oh, yes. Some are good eggs.
Yes.
He is a good egg.
He's a good egg, the very best.
I find tying to that question, I find that I keep thinking about Cheryl. Like why aren't they firing Cheryl? Did Cheryl do it? Would Cheryl do this? So I'm wondering, as Cheryl gets her second chance, if she'll have any growth in the next couple books.
She does. Yep. She appears and is as dastardly as ever in the Mistletoe Mystery, and nasty to the core. And again, she's there in the next book as well. You know, and she's one of these people who she tries to, you know, move out of her core evil, but she slips. Oh, yes, she does. And then she does it again. And Molly has a lot of patience for her. You know, she would have been out the door without Molly. She would have been out that door ages ago. Mr. Snow would have fired her. But Molly thinks of her as a pet project, you know, a very rotten egg that she hopes to one day turn good. And if it were me, I wouldn't invest so much, but Molly is better than me. So
Yeah. Well, and I love after the interviews when she's like, no, Lily is the one. We're hiring Lily. Mr. Snow's like, what? But
yeah.
just her view and what she sees is so different. So,
Yeah, well, I think in hiring too, that's one place where prejudice can sneak in so very easily, and where the first appearance makes, you know, such an impression, and we often don't get a very clear view of people.
right.
And I wanted Molly, because she's so different, to actually see with a rare clarity that most people cannot.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think that example that you just pointed out is exactly that. Lily, who is shy and you know, can barely make eye contact with people, she's the one who Molly hires and says, that one, she is going to be a great maid. And she's right.
Can you talk or can you share anything about the forthcoming screen adaptation of The Maid?
I can share a little bit. So things were really quiet there for over a year because there was, you know, dual strikes in Hollywood. So things
Right.
got really slow. But things are happening again, and I'm pretty excited about it. There is a script now, and the search for a director is on. So very soon, I hope, one never knows, but one can only hope that we'll be able to see The Maid on the big screen. And for me, the most exciting part is that it's exactly the opposite of what we've just described about you holding the image in your head. On the
Mhm.
screen, every little detail is delivered to you in Technicolor. And I am so looking forward to that, to having that, especially the Regency Grand Hotel, spring to life in all of its splendor, in all of that lush detail. That for me is going to be an absolute gift to see.
Oh, it'll be wonderful to compare just like in my head and what comes out on the screen.
Well, that's true. And we've all had those experiences where you're like,
Mhm.
yes, this is what I saw, or oh, that's not what I saw. But that is the magic of filmmaking, is that it's a parallel art,
Mhm.
very different art, finally, from the book. So the book can exist and be what the book is, and the movie will be what it is, and they're two different things.
Exactly. Another question just came in. Does the author have any say in the book cover art? I love the minimalist choices and bold colors.
Yes, I do too. Yes, we do. You don't have final say, but certainly, you know, there are all kinds of reasons why a publisher wants a writer to like the cover, because you're the one who's out there promoting it.
Mhm.
And I must say, I'm very invested in this design, and I think, you know, in a lot of ways, I was a participant in the design process in a slightly different way because I've worked in publishing for so long.
Oh,
And you know, that was really part of my job, was working a lot on covers and packaging for books. So you know, I had a great team of people working towards this sort of aesthetic and feel, minimalist, as that a reader said, but also with that sense of mystery embedded in the very conceit that something is shown and something is just off screen that we cannot see.
yeah.
And I wanted to play with that mystique, and I think the designer got it really right in both cases.
Oh, yeah. And I think I saw mistletoe murders in bright green. So that'll be fun too.
Yes, so same palette, or sorry, same style, but a different palette. It's a green cover this time, with a little hand in the middle holding a gift.
Mm. So as we come towards the end of our hour that has flown by. Do you have any final comments or stories or things you want to share with our viewers?
Just thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting libraries and authors, and thank you for being my co-creators in this imaginary world that we create together. I'm deeply grateful.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure. And, I loved the book. I can't wait to give it to everybody at the library and recommend it. So my mom is the next one who gets these two to read, and she
Excellent.
tends to share with the ladies. So
Excellent. Thank you, Stacy's mom.
So wonderful. Thank you so much, Nita Prose, and thank you for everyone who joined us this evening for our Club Book event. That is all the time we have. Thank you again, Nita, for penciling us into your busy spring. It has been such a pleasure. This has been a virtual presentation of Club Book, a long-running literary series of Melsa made possible by the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Special thanks again to Anoka County Library for the part they played in bringing Nita to us. Before you log off, look for the Club Book survey link, which is in the comments and will be projected in place of my video momentarily. Last, consider joining Club Book next Tuesday, April 16th for their next virtual program. This one featuring award-winning Panamanian American novelist Cristina Enriquez, author of The Book of Unknown Americans, and most recently, The Great Divide. You can learn more about that and other upcoming events at clubbook.org. Have a great night, everyone.